and welcome back to my channel. Today you're going to be learning all the things that you can do to avoid interrupting or ruining the birth space. So this video is directed at the birthing partners, at the doulas, the midwives, the labor nurses who have an impact or can have an impact on the birth experience of the birthing person. So I have seen in my years of birth work the most incredible birthing partners that have really transformed the woman's or the birthing person's experience. And equally, I've seen some that have just made some very unintentional mistakes, maybe done some things that if I was the birthing person would really have annoyed me. So today we're joined by this little cutie pie who should be napping, and I'm going to tell you the top things that I would recommend you do to avoid being. Okay, so my very first tip is actually to do everything that you can to avoid anything other than celebration of a due date or guest date. We know from research that only between 4 and 5% of babies are actually born on that date. And so instead of piling on the pressure of the guest date or the due date being the day that we expect baby to arrive, what I would say instead is to have a celebration of some kind, that we have reached that mark, and instead of putting pressure on the mama, to instead say, okay, every single day after this due date or guest date is a celebration, because we know that instead what's happening of our baby being overdue or late, born into the world, what's happening is our baby is readying themselves for the outside world that little bit more. So it means they're going to have an easier, gentle transition to extrauterine life, but also an easier time with things like breastfeeding and all those lovely newborn reflexes, and things like coordinating their suck, swallow, breathe sequence will be that little bit easier with a baby who is totally ready for the outside world. So remove the pressure around the due date and instead celebrate each day that comes after it. So my tip number 1 to avoid ruining the birth space is to become informed and educated yourself. So I always like to say that really what's priority and what's key if you plan on being in the birth space is to make sure that you are informed and as educated, if not more than, the birthing person themselves, so that you can be an advocate for them, but also so that you can understand the birthing process. I would say watch birthing videos, listen to podcasts with different birthing stories, understand how that process might look, sound, and smell, so that when you experience then the sounds of the birthing person, oh, cuddly boy today. The sounds of the birthing person as they moo and ah and ooh and do that whole birth song and dance, it isn't something that sends you into panic mode. We want to avoid panic mode. We want to avoid you becoming the rescuer. Birth is a beautiful, physiological, magical experience that can leave you feeling empowered and changed as a person. But if you feel as if that's something that you need to be rescuing from, what happens is, even if the birthing person themselves is deep in a state of relaxation and calm, if you're going in there and feeling a sense of panic, what happens is they pick up on that energy. So become familiar with the physiological process of birth. Join in on that birthing class. If you feel that that wasn't enough for you and you want to understand the process a bit more, go ahead and do another class. I always like to suggest joining my Empowered Birth course, and if that's not enough for you, we can do a one-to-one session to kind of iron out those little tweaks. Maybe if you have a fear yourself, diving deep into that fear and working through it, because I want you to feel as educated and as empowered as the birthing person, so that you can walk into the experience being able to truly support them in a way that feels exciting to you. It's your birth, it's the birth of your baby too, so that's equally. Okay, so without this video getting very waffly, my next point is that you also need to mind yourself to a certain degree. So this means you making sure that you're eating enough and that you're resting enough. Just in the same way that I recommend the birthing person lies down and rests in bed for as long as possible, I also make sure that I make the same recommendation and suggestion for the birthing partner. The reason for that is if you are doing lots of hip squeezes, if you are supporting the birthing person in a squatted position, it can be very physical and it can be hard on your body. So making sure that you are taking that same rest between contractions, sitting down, relaxing your body, and taking as many deep breaths as is needed, it's so important. My next tip is to have an out for yourself. So if you do feel a sense of panic, if you do feel maybe a moment of where you've had to advocate for your partner and you're second guessing yourself, maybe you want a second opinion, how is that going to look for me? When I've in moments of stress, what sort of a backup plan do I have to make sure that I can take the time that I need so that I can have that clarity of thought to be able to support and make a decision that's best for the birthing person and your baby. So in this scenario, we're thinking maybe it's going outside and making a phone call to your doula. Maybe it's hiring a doula so you have that person with you so that you can also be present to enjoy the birth experience. Maybe it's a case of getting outside, taking off your shoes and socks and just doing a little bit of grounding. Maybe it's some breath work and taking a few deep breaths of fresh air to remind yourself that you were safe and you were okay. Maybe it's having the BRAIN acronym written out so that you can make an educated and empowered decision, informed decision, knowing that you are not making one that is rushed and one out of panic and fear. So my next point then is going to be about trying your best to limit the conversation. Today is not the time for you to go ahead and make friends with the labor nurses. Today is not the time for you to be chatting away to the cleaner. Today is about you keeping your mouth closed as much as possible and maintaining your support and your focus on the birthing person. Giving them the time and the space for you to be able to focus inwards on what they really need will make sure you notice the small things like their chapped lips, so they might need some lip balm. Maybe it's they need a drink of water they haven't drank in a while. Maybe it's remembering to support them going out to the toilet to empty their bladder for baby's head to descend and create that space there. By reducing any of the external noise that you might be creating, you are able to focus more inward on the birthing person. And as the support person, that is what you really need to be doing, and that is the goal. So that's all of my tips for today. Keep as quiet as you can so you can maintain the focus on the birthing person. Make sure you're eating and drinking enough for you so that you can maintain your stamina and your energy. Resting enough goes along with that as well. So staying in bed until as long as possible, just in the same way that I recommend the birthing person do, until you can no longer, and then you're getting up. I always like to encourage people to not chase labor, because labor will happen when it is ready. So resting in bed, creating that really lovely oxytocin-rich environment will encourage that to happen. And then the last thing then that I talked about was trying your best to avoid panic and fear in the birth space. So educating yourself around the different decisions that you might have to make during labor, how that physiological process works, and of course watching lots of birthing videos so you can familiarize yourself with the sounds and the movements that might happen, so that you can avoid raising that panic bell or that panic alarm, so that you can be the person that stays cool, calm and collected, which will have that lovely knock-on effect for the birthing person. I hope you found these tips helpful. I have met so many birthing partners that have just changed the course of a birth, and I really hope that you feel educated and empowered moving into meeting your baby. If you've got some more questions around how you can be the best birthing partner, make sure and check out the link below so that you can join up for my next Empowered Birth workshop. I hope to see you there.